I think like the thing that the person that probably is most interesting to me is I can't remember the name of the person right now, but is this person who does UN emergency response, and so he basically is the development manager for response at the UN, and so he's the type of person that when the Ebola when Ebola was really spreading in Africa in 2016, it's like his job to figure out what to do to help that. Or like when Haiti had their problems with the earthquake and everything, like it's his job to go in and really try to understand like what can he do to actually make the situation better, right? And that's not something that's as simple as it sounds. And I think that's why it's so interesting and it's such an amazing job to me is that he's really, there are definitely product managers that deal with life and death situations. Okay, those are product managers usually that work for medical or certain types of government programs or things like that. But the reality is like the person who's building Snapchat, they're probably not dealing with life and death other than maybe helping avoid stalkers or something like that, right? So to me, it's like this person who really is doing essentially product management, but for like people's lives. It's just really amazing, and I think has got to be very rewarding work. It's got to be very difficult though, because when we talk about making trade-offs between working on this thing or that thing, right? And we talk about how we do estimation or how do we decide where to pay things when we're building a product, like I just can't even imagine the type of difficult decisions this person has to make. And so I think understanding how that person actually works, how they make those decisions is incredibly important to me. And then I think also like, how do they continue to keep their humanity in all this is probably the most difficult thing, right? Because when we talk about empathy, and there's been a bit of a backlash the last month or two on Medium about empathy and like how empathy is used in technology. But how do you still kind of keep an understanding that these are real people that you're dealing with and that you're actually helping in some way? Like they're already hurting in some way, right? Like how are you actually helping them? How are you making their lives better in a way that is very substantial and may not always be as long-term as you'd like it to be, right? Because things like aid to Haiti or stopping the spread of Ebola, those are things that are helpful for now, like this particular disaster. But it's not really speaking to the fact that, like, how do you now hand this off to another team that worries more about the ongoing development of these areas, right? Like, how do you build infrastructure in places? This is something that my sister actually works in Kenya for an NGO. And so, I've been trying to pitch her organization on doing some pro bono work from philosophy. How do we apply technology, but in a way that's interesting? So for example, like they don't have, smartphone penetration in places like Kenya is actually pretty small, but feature phones are really popular. In fact, like a lot of the way people do payments today is really just a fancy way of sending phone minutes between people. So anyways, like I think that to me, that's why I've always had this pull that like when you start to try to understand people a lot, when you try to really get into people's heads to understand who and why they do things, I think ideally it doesn't make you cynic, right? And so I think like that person that works at the UN, he's got to be the least cynical person, or at least I hope he is the least cynical person ever, because he's the person that's really like making these great change in life. And so I don't know, I would love to hear and see how his thought process works. Like, how does he work with the people? Because I'm sure that he works in a very high stress type of situation, right? Like understanding all of the different ways that he upkeeps his own self, I think is one of those very interesting questions I have. Because, in very stressful situations, even for product people, I feel like product people take a lot of brunt of the team's like anger and like concern and just stress in general. And so, I talk to a lot of different product people. It seems that some of the product people I talk about are more likely to be into mindful practice and meditation and stuff like that, or anger management. So maybe we're just all broken people. Maybe that's what it is. That's why we get into product management. But I think like, understanding how he keeps himself healthy, right? Like I think is another thing that I think would be like amazing and interesting to understand.